Have you ever been judged solely by what you're wearing? Imagine sitting in first class, minding your own business, only to be humiliated, screamed at, and accused of theft by a flight attendant who thinks you don't belong. That's exactly what happened to a woman named Vivienne on Flight 404 to London. The flight attendant, a woman named Tiffany, thought she was kicking off a trashy passenger. She didn't realize she was actually assaulting the new owner of the airline. Stick around to see the moment the mid-air announcement changed everything and the brutal karma that waited for Tiffany on the tarmac. You do not want to miss this. The fluorescent lights of JFK International Airport hummed with a low, headache-inducing buzz that seemed to drill directly into Dr. Vivienne Dubois' temples. She was exhausted. Not just tired bone-deep, soul-weary, exhausted. She had spent the last 3 weeks in a remote village outside of Nairobi, overseeing the installation of a clean water filtration system funded by her private equity firm, Dubois and Sterling Holdings. Vivienne was a woman of immense power in the corporate world, a silent titan who moved billions of dollars with a signature. But today, she didn't look like a titan. She looked like a wreck. Her hair, usually coiffed in a sharp, professional bob, was pulled back into a frizzy, messy bun held together by a cheap, elastic tie. She wore an oversized, charcoal gray hoodie she'd bought at a tourist shop 3 years ago, baggy sweatpants that had seen better days, and a pair of worn-out sneakers caked in dry Kenyan red clay. She carried no designer purse, just a battered canvas tote bag and a crumpled boarding pass. She just wanted to go home to London. She just wanted sleep. As she approached Gate 22 for Aerolux Flight 882, she saw the queue for first class, priority boarding. It was empty, save for a red velvet rope and a podium manned by a flight attendant who looked like she had been carved out of ice and expensive foundation. The name tag pinned to her immaculate navy blue uniform read Tiffany. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful, and her lips were painted a shade of crimson that screamed danger. Tiffany was currently busy typing furiously on her personal iPhone, hidden behind the high counter of the podium. Vivienne dragged her feet toward the red carpet. She knew she looked rough. She didn't care. She had paid $12,000 for seat 1A, and she intended to sleep in it before the plane even taxied. As Vivienne stepped onto the red carpet, Tiffany didn't look up. "Excuse me," Vivienne said, her voice raspy from the dry air. Tiffany held up a manicured finger, not lifting her eyes from her screen. 1 second. Vivienne waited. 10 seconds. 20. 30. The line for economy was starting to build up behind the partitions, and people were staring. "I'd like to board, please," Vivienne said, a little firmer this time. Tiffany finally looked up. Her blue eyes swept over Vivienne from the messy bun, down the oversized hoodie, to the clay-stained sneakers, and then snapped back up to Vivienne's face with a look of unmasked disgust. It was a look Vivienne had seen 1,000 times before. It was the look that said, "You are in the wrong place." "Ma'am," Tiffany said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet condescension, like syrup over razor blades. "The boarding for Zone 4 and 5 hasn't started yet. You need to wait over there with the general group." She pointed a long, red fingernail toward the crowded seating area where restless passengers were fighting for outlet space. "I'm not in Zone 4, Vivienne said calmly. She placed her boarding pass on the counter. "I'm in Zone 1. Tiffany didn't even touch the pass. She actually laughed a short, sharp scoff. "Honey, please don't try this. I've had a long day. Zone 1 is for first class and Diamond Medallion members only. It's for people who pay a premium for priority." "I am aware of how airports work," Vivienne replied, her patience fraying. "Scan the pass." Tiffany sighed, a theatrical exhale that shook her shoulders. She snatched the paper from the counter as if it were contaminated. "Fine. But when this beeps red, you are going to the back of the line, and I'm going to have security check your bag for trying to bypass protocol." Tiffany slammed the QR code under the scanner, a smug smirk already forming on her lips, ready to savor the rejection tone. Beep beep. Green light. The screen on the podium flashed. Passenger. Dubois, Vivienne. Seat 1A. Status, Vivienne. Tiffany's smirk faltered, but only for a microsecond. She stared at the screen, then at the machine, and gave it a hard smack on the side. "Piece of junk," she muttered. She looked back at Vivienne, her eyes narrowing. She didn't see a VIP. She saw a scam. "The machine is glitching," Tiffany declared, tossing the boarding pass back at Vivienne. It fluttered to the floor. Vivienne stared at the paper on the dirty carpet, then slowly looked up at Tiffany. The air around them seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Pick it up." "Excuse me?" Tiffany gasped, hand going to her chest. "I said, pick it up," Vivienne said, her voice low but carrying the weight of a woman who had fired entire executive boards. "You dropped my boarding pass on the floor. The machine didn't glitch. I am in seat 1A. Now pick it up and let me board." Tiffany's face flushed a blotchy red. She looked around. A few businessmen in suits behind Vivienne were watching. She couldn't lose face. "I will do no such thing," Tiffany hissed. "And since you want to have an attitude, you can wait. I need to verify this ticket manually. It's probably a counterfeit. We've had a lot of your type. Trying to Photoshop tickets lately." "My type?" Vivienne asked, arching a brow. "Scammers," Tiffany said quickly, though the racial undertone hung heavy in the air. She picked up the gate phone. "I'm calling the gate supervisor. Step aside." Vivienne didn't move. She checked her watch. It was a Patek Philippe, but it was hidden under the sleeve of her hoodie. "Call him. His name is Roger Sterling. Tell him Vivienne is here." Tiffany froze. She knew the name Roger Sterling. He was the regional director for Aerolux, a man most flight attendants only saw in training videos. She looked at the disheveled woman in front of her. There was no way this woman knew Roger Sterling. She was bluffing. "Step aside," Tiffany commanded. Before Vivienne could respond, a man in a bespoke Italian suit stepped up behind her. "Is there a problem here?" Tiffany's entire demeanor shifted instantly. She beamed, her smile bright and fake. "Oh, Mr. Kensington, so sorry for the delay. This passenger is just confused about her seating assignment and refuses to move. I was just about to call security." Mr. Kensington, a tall man with silver hair, looked at Vivienne. He didn't look at her clothes, he looked at her posture. He recognized the stance of someone who wasn't afraid. "She's holding a first-class boarding pass," Kensington observed, glancing at the paper on the floor. He bent down, picked it up, and handed it to Vivienne. "Here you go, miss." "Thank you," Vivienne said softly. "She probably found it in the trash," Tiffany muttered, loud enough for both to hear. "That's enough," Vivienne said. She grabbed her pass. "I am boarding. If you want to stop me, you can have the police drag me off the plane. But I suggest you check that manifest again, Tiffany." Vivienne walked past the podium. Tiffany reached out as if to grab her arm, but withdrew at the last second, seething. As Vivienne walked down the jet bridge, she heard Tiffany's voice echoing behind her, loud and shrill. "I'm watching you. One wrong move and you're off this flight." Vivienne shook her head. She took out her phone and sent a single text message to a private number. Subject: Flight 882. Personnel issue. Assessment begins now. The cabin of the Aerolux Boeing 777 was a sanctuary of cream, leather, and soft, ambient lighting. First class was configured in individual suites, each with a sliding door for privacy. Vivienne found seat 1A, tossed her canvas tote into the overhead bin, and collapsed into the plush seat. She closed her eyes, letting out a long sigh. She didn't want a confrontation. She didn't want to ruin anyone's career. She had just acquired a 51% controlling stake in Aerolux International 3 days ago. The deal was secret. The press release wasn't scheduled until Monday morning. Technically, she owned this plane. She owned the seat she was sitting in. She owned the uniform Tiffany was wearing. She had planned to just sleep. But Tiffany had made it personal. "Ticket?" a sharp voice barked. Vivienne opened her eyes. Tiffany was standing over her pod, hands on her hips. The rest of the first-class passengers were boarding now, wealthy tourists, business executives, a minor celebrity. They were all watching. "I already showed you my ticket," Vivienne said. "That was at the gate. This is the cabin. I need to ensure you aren't poaching a seat," Tiffany said loudly. "We have a full flight today, and I have a paying customer, Mr. Abernathy, who usually sits in this row. I need to make sure you didn't just steal a seat assignment." Vivienne reached into her pocket and produced the crumpled pass again. Tiffany snatched it, squinted at it, and then pulled out a heavy manifest binder. She ran her finger down the list, aggressively tapping the paper. "Dubois, Dubois," Tiffany muttered. She stopped. Her finger hovered over the name. "Dubois, V. 1A VIP. Own." The code OWN was rare. Usually, it meant owner's guest or corporate ownership. Tiffany, however, interpreted it differently in the heat of her bias. She assumed it was a system error or a hacked ticket. "This doesn't look right," Tiffany said. "I'm going to hold on to this boarding pass." She slipped it into her pocket. "No, you give that back," Vivian said, sitting up straighter. "I need to verify it with the captain," Tiffany lied. "In the meantime, don't get comfortable. I have a feeling you'll be moving back to row 45 shortly. And put that bag away." She pointed to Vivian's canvas tote, which was slightly sticking out of the overhead bin. "It looks like a laundry bag. It's ruining the aesthetic of the cabin." "The bin is closed, Tiffany. Leave it alone," Vivian said. "It's Miss Miller to you," Tiffany snapped. At that moment, another flight attendant, a younger brunette with a kind face and a name tag reading Sarah, appeared. She looked nervous. "Tiffany, is everything okay?" Sarah asked softly. "We need to get the pre-departure drinks started." "Not now, Sarah," Tiffany waved her off. "I'm dealing with a squatter." "Actually," Sarah said, glancing at her own digital tablet, "the system shows seat 1A is occupied by a V. Dubois. It's flagged as do not disturb, high priority." Tiffany glared at Sarah. "The system is glitching today, Sarah. Look at her." She gestured wildly at Vivian's hoodie. "Does this look like high priority to you? This looks like a standby passenger who got lucky, or a fraudster. Go get the champagne for Mr. Kensington and Mrs. Vanderwall. I'll handle the situation here." Sarah looked apologetically at Vivian, mouthed, "I'm sorry," and hurried away. Vivian leaned back. She decided to let Tiffany dig her hole deeper. "I'd like a glass of water, please," Vivian said. Tiffany laughed. It was a cruel, hollow sound. "Water? Champagne is for first class. Water is for, well, you can wait until we reach cruising altitude. If you're still here." She spun on her heel and marched away to fawn over a man in seat 2B, her voice instantly transforming into a sultry purr. "Mr. Sterling. Oh, I mean, Mr. Kensington. So wonderful to see you again. Can I start you off with some Dom Perignon?" Vivian watched the performance. She saw Tiffany serve every single person in the cabin a pre-flight drink. She served the man in 2B. She served the couple in 3A and 3B. She even served the teenager in 4A who was wearing headphones and ignoring her. She skipped seat 1A entirely. Vivian remained silent. She pulled out her phone and opened the Notes app. Item 1. Staff training on bias required immediately. Item 2. Review termination protocols for senior cabin crew. Item 3. Tiffany Miller. The plane pushed back from the gate. The safety video played. Tiffany stood at the front of the cabin, demonstrating the life vest. As she went through the motions, she locked eyes with Vivian. She smirked and winked, a gesture of pure intimidation. Vivian didn't blink. She just stared back, her face a mask of calm calculation. The engines roared to life, and the plane began to taxi. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice came over the intercom. "This is Captain Robert Anderson. We're next in line for takeoff. Flight time to London is 6 hours and 40 minutes. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the award-winning service of Aerolux." Award-winning, Vivian thought. We'll see about that. As the plane hurled itself down the runway and lifted into the sky, the G-force pressed Vivian into her seat. She looked out the window at the shrinking city of New York. The wheels retracted with a thud. The seatbelt sign pinged off. Immediately, Tiffany was in the aisle. She pulled the curtain shut between first class and the galley, but she did it with such force that the fabric whipped the air. She emerged a moment later with a hot towel tray. She walked past Vivian. "Excuse me," Vivian said. "May I have a towel?" Tiffany stopped. She looked down, feigning surprise. "Oh, I didn't see you there. You blend into the upholstery so well with that outfit." "Sorry, I'm all out of hot towels. I only heated enough for the list." "There are 12 seats," Vivian said. "There are 12 passengers. How are you out?" "I gave 2 to Mr. Kensington." Tiffany smiled sweetly. "He's a Diamond member. We prioritize loyalty." Vivian nodded slowly. "I see. Do you want a napkin?" Tiffany reached into her pocket and pulled out a flimsy paper cocktail napkin, tossing it onto Vivian's lap. "There. Wipe your hands." A gasp came from across the aisle. It was Mrs. Vanderwall in seat 1B. an elderly woman draped in pearls. "My word," she whispered to her husband. That was incredibly rude. Tiffany didn't hear her. She was already moving down the aisle, feeling victorious. She thought she was putting a scrub in her place. She thought she was protecting the sanctity of her first-class cabin. She had no idea that the scrub in seat 1A had just connected to the onboard Wi-Fi and was currently initiating a video call with the Aerolux board of directors. 2 hours into the flight, the aroma of roasted garlic, rosemary, and searing beef filled the first-class cabin. Sarah, the junior flight attendant, was pushing the trolley down the aisle, her face tight with anxiety. She had been watching Tiffany's behavior with growing horror but felt powerless to stop her senior lead. When the trolley reached seat 1A, Vivian looked up from her iPad. She was currently reviewing the quarterly financial reports for the airline reports that showed a disturbing dip in customer satisfaction scores, specifically on transatlantic routes. "Good evening, Miss Dubois," Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly. "For dinner tonight, we have a choice of the pan-seared filet mignon with truffle mash, the miso-glazed Chilean sea bass, or the wild mushroom risotto. What would you Suddenly, Tiffany appeared from the galley, physically nudging Sarah aside with her hip. "I'll handle this, Sarah. Go check on economy. They're ringing call buttons like it's a disco back there." Sarah hesitated. "But Tiffany, I haven't served." "Go," Tiffany snapped. Sarah lowered her eyes and retreated to the back. Tiffany turned to Vivian, her smile gone. She looked down at the menu Vivian was holding. "Bad news," Tiffany said, not sounding sorry at all. "We're out of options." Vivian looked around. "You haven't served half the cabin yet. How are you out?" "Pre-orders," Tiffany lied smoothly. "All the verified premium passengers pre-ordered their meals online. Since you were a last-minute addition, we didn't cater for you. You know how it is. Supply chain issues." Vivian knew for a fact that first class was catered with 150% redundancy. There were at least 4 extra steaks in the galley. "So, I am to starve?" "No, I'm not a monster," Tiffany scoffed. She reached into the bottom shelf of the trolley and pulled out a foil-wrapped rectangle. It wasn't on a porcelain plate. It was a standard economy aluminum tray. "We have an extra pasta surprise from the main cabin. It's actually quite popular." She dropped the hot aluminum tray onto Vivian's linen tablecloth. "Thud. Enjoy," Tiffany said, turning away. Vivian stared at the foil. She slowly peeled it back. Inside was a congealed lump of overcooked penne in a watery tomato sauce, accompanied by a stale bread roll. She looked across the aisle. Mr. Kensington in 2B was cutting into a tender, pink steak. Mrs. Vanderwall was enjoying the sea bass. Vivian took a deep breath. "Do not engage," she told herself. "Let her dig." She picked up her fork and took a bite of the bread. She would eat it. She would eat every bite of this insult, and she would remember the taste when she signed Tiffany's termination letter. But Tiffany wasn't done. She was pacing the galley, fuming. The fact that Vivian was eating the slop without complaining infuriated her. She wanted a reaction. She wanted a reason to use the handcuffs stored in the cockpit. Tiffany grabbed the purser's tablet, the main device used to control the cabin lighting, seat temperatures, and access passenger manifests. An idea formed in her mind. A wicked, career-ending idea. She walked down the aisle, holding the tablet. As she passed seat 1A, she deliberately stumbled. "Whoops," Tiffany yelped. She lurched sideways, slamming her hip into Vivian's shoulder. The tablet flew out of her hand and slid under Vivian's seat. "Ow!" Tiffany cried out, rubbing her hip. "You tripped me." The cabin went silent. Mr. Kensington looked up, fork suspended halfway to his mouth. She didn't move. "Tiffany, you fell into her." She stuck her foot out. Tiffany shrieked, her voice rising an octave. "I saw it. And now, oh my God, where is the master tablet?" Vivian looked down. "It's under my seat. You threw it there." "I threw it?" Tiffany gasped. "That tablet contains sensitive security data, passenger credit card info. It's a federally protected device." She dropped to her knees, not to look for the tablet, but to get in Vivian's face. "Give it back." "I don't have it," Vivian said, recoiling from the woman's proximity. "It slid under the ottoman. Reach under and get it." Tiffany stood up, her face flushed with adrenaline. She turned to the cabin, addressing the other passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption. It appears we have a security situation. This passenger has concealed the master flight tablet and is refusing to return it. This is ridiculous, Vivian said, her voice turning icy. It is on the floor. I checked the floor, Tiffany lied. It's gone. You put it in that nasty laundry bag you're hugging. Vivian's hand tightened on her canvas tote. Inside wasn't laundry. Inside was the prototype blueprint for the Sterling water filter, intellectual property worth roughly $50 million. She wasn't about to let this unhinged woman rummage through it. You will not touch my bag, Vivian warned. Aha! Tiffany pointed a red-tipped finger at her. Guilty. She's hiding it. She's probably trying to steal credit card numbers right now. I knew you were a scammer. Tiffany lunged for the bag. Vivian was faster. She blocked Tiffany's hand with her forearm. It was a defensive move, gentle but firm. Tiffany threw herself backward as if she'd been shot. She stumbled into the aisle, clutching her wrist. Assault, Tiffany screamed. She hit me. She assaulted a flight crew member. That's a federal offense. Sarah. Sarah, call the captain. Sarah came running from the back, pale as a sheet. What happened? She hit me and she stole the tablet, Tiffany cried, squeezing out a fake tear. Code red, Sarah. Get Captain Anderson out here now. We need to restrain her. Vivienne stood up. She was tall, reaching 5'10", and when she stood to her full height, she towered over Tiffany. Call him, Vivienne said, her voice booming through the silent cabin. Call the captain. Now. The cockpit door unlocked with a heavy mechanical clunk. Captain Robert Anderson stepped out. He was a man of 60, with salt and pepper hair and the weary look of a man who just wanted a smooth retirement. He had flown for Aerolux for 30 years. He had seen drunk passengers, sick passengers, and scared passengers, but he had rarely seen his lead flight attendant looking this frantic. What is going on here? Anderson asked, his voice a low rumble. He adjusted his hat, his eyes scanning the scene. He saw Tiffany, clutching her wrist and hyperventilating theatrically. He saw the first-class passengers looking uncomfortable, and he saw Vivian, standing calmly by seat 1A in her oversized hoodie, looking him dead in the eye. Captain, Tiffany rushed to him. She attacked me. She tripped me while I was doing checks, stole the master tablet, and when I tried to retrieve it, she struck my arm. I want her restrained. I want the police waiting at Heathrow. Captain Anderson frowned. He looked at Vivian. His training told him to trust his crew, but his gut told him something was off. The woman in 1A didn't look like a hijacker. She looked bored. Ma'am, Captain Anderson said to Vivian, is this true? No, Robert, it is not, Vivian said. The captain blinked. He paused. Excuse me? Do I know you? We met at the company Christmas gala 4 years ago in Geneva, Vivian said smoothly. You were complaining about the catering budget cuts. I believe you said the coffee tasted like hot mud. Anderson's eyes widened. That was a private conversation he'd had with a few executives. He looked closer at her. The hoodie threw him off. The messy hair threw him off. But the voice, the commanding cadence. It was familiar. Who are you? He asked, his tone dropping from authoritative to curious. I am a passenger in seat 1A who has been denied food, harassed, and now accused of theft, Vivian said. Your flight attendant threw the tablet under my seat. It is likely wedged between the track and the carpet. Anderson looked at Sarah. Sarah, check the seat. Don't bother, Tiffany interrupted. She put it in her bag. I saw her. We need to search that bag, Captain. It's a safety issue. She could have a weapon in there. Look at how she's dressed. She's obviously not one of us. Anderson looked at Tiffany, noting the venom in her voice. Tiffany, calm down. I will not calm down. I am the victim here, Tiffany shouted. If you don't search that bag, I'm filing a grievance with the union. I don't feel safe flying with her. Captain Anderson sighed. He turned to Vivienne. Ma'am, to resolve this, and to ensure the safety of the flight, would you mind letting us check the bag? Just to clear this up. Vivienne looked at the captain. Captain, if you open this bag, you are crossing a line you cannot uncross. There is no tablet in here. There are confidential documents belonging to Dubois and Sterling Holdings. Dubois and Sterling? The captain froze. That's the parent company. They just bought us out. Exactly, Vivian said. Tiffany laughed. A harsh, cackling sound. Oh, please, Captain, don't fall for it. She's a crazy person. She probably Googled that name while sitting here. She's a homeless woman who got a lucky ticket. Search the bag. The pressure was mounting. The other passengers were whispering. I have to check, the captain said apologetically. If a crew member alleges theft of a security device, I have to verify. Fine, Vivian said. She picked up the canvas tote and dumped the contents onto the seat. Clatter. Out fell a makeup bag, a heavily annotated book on hydrological engineering, a pair of reading glasses, and a thick blue folder stamped Top Secret, Merger Acquisition, Aerolux, Dubois. There was no tablet. Sarah, who was on her knees by the seat, suddenly spoke up. Captain? I found it. She reached deep under the metal tracking of the seat, near the wall, and pulled out the iPad. It was wedged in the frame, exactly where she said it was. The cabin went deadly silent. Captain Anderson looked at the tablet in Sarah's hand. He looked at the documents on the seat. He looked at Tiffany, whose face had gone from red to a ghostly shade of pale white. She must have kicked it there, Tiffany stammered. She hit it when I wasn't looking. Tiffany, Captain Anderson barked. Enough. He turned to Vivienne. He looked at the blue folder. He read the name on the corner of the document. Prepared for V. Dubois, CEO. The color drained from Captain Anderson's face. He looked at Vivienne, really looked at her this time. He recognized the eyes. He recognized the watch on her wrist, now visible as her sleeve had ridden up. Miss Dubois? He whispered. Dr. Vivienne Dubois? Yes, Captain, Vivienne said, crossing her arms. I just bought your airline, and I decided to fly incognito to see how my employees treat their customers. Specifically, customers who don't look like they belong. She turned her gaze slowly to Tiffany. And Tiffany, Vivienne said, her voice quiet and terrifying. You have given me quite a show. Tiffany stood trembling. She opened her mouth to speak, to spin another lie, but no words came out. Captain, Vivienne said, I would like to return to my seat. I have work to do, and I would like this flight attendant removed from my presence for the remainder of the flight. If she comes near row 1 again, I will have the plane diverted. Understood, ma'am, Anderson said, straightening up. Tiffany, get to the back galley. Stay there. Do not speak to anyone. Sarah, you are now the lead for first class. But Tiffany started. Now, Anderson roared. Tiffany flinched. She looked around the cabin. Mr. Kensington was shaking his head in disgust. Mrs. Vanderwall was glaring at her. She had lost the room. She turned and fled through the curtain, her heels clicking rapidly on the floor. Captain Anderson looked at Vivienne. Miss Dubois, I am profoundly sorry. I had no idea. We will discuss your command of the cabin later, Captain, Vivienne said, sitting back down. For now, please fly the plane. I have a board meeting to prepare for. Yes, ma'am. The captain retreated to the cockpit, closing the door softly. Vivienne sat in the silence. Sarah approached her, trembling, holding a bottle of Dom Perignon. Miss Dubois, can I get you anything? Sarah asked. Vivienne looked at the young woman. Yes, Sarah, you can get me that pasta. I'm actually quite hungry. But we have the steak. I can cook a fresh one. The pasta is fine, Vivienne said. And Sarah? You're doing a good job. Sarah smiled weakly and hurried away. Vivienne leaned back. The immediate battle was won, but the war wasn't over. Tiffany was in the back, cornered and dangerous. And they still had 4 hours until they landed in London. Vivienne knew that people like Tiffany didn't just give up. They lashed out. She picked up her phone. She had a signal now. She typed a message to her head of security in London. Text, meet flight 882 at the gate. Police escort required. We have a situation. The atmosphere in the rear galley of flight 882 was toxic. Tiffany Miller sat on a jump seat, her legs crossed aggressively, furiously tapping a message out on her phone to her union rep. She had been banished from first class, an indignity she had never suffered in her 8 years of flying. It's harassment, pure and simple. Tiffany spat at Mark, a junior attendant who was trying to organize the duty-free cart. The captain is senile. He's letting a homeless woman run the flight deck. I'm going to have his license for this. Mark kept his head down. Tiffany, Sarah said the lady in 1A had documents. Confidential ones. Sarah is an idiot, Tiffany snapped. You can print anything off the internet. I'm telling you, that woman is a grifter. She probably stole that watch she's wearing. And when we land, I'm going to be the one laughing when the Metropolitan Police drag her off. Tiffany stood up and paced the narrow space. She needed a plan. She couldn't just wait for the landing. She needed to control the narrative. If the captain filed a report first, she would be on the defensive. She grabbed the interphone handset to call the cockpit, planning to claim that Vivienne had made a verbal threat against the aircraft. It was the nuclear option, but Tiffany was desperate. She lifted the receiver. It was dead. What the? She tapped the cradle. Nothing. The captain cut the line to the back, Mark whispered, looking terrified. He isolated the aft galley. Tiffany slammed the handset into the wall. This is a conspiracy. Suddenly, the cabin lights flickered and brightened. The chime sounded. Bing bong. Captain Anderson's voice crackled over the PA system. It wasn't the usual mumbled flight update. His voice was crystal clear, authoritative, and laced with a cold seriousness that made every passenger on the plane look up from their movies. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Anderson from the flight deck. We are beginning our initial descent into London Heathrow. The weather is overcast, 12 degrees Celsius. He paused. The silence on the comms was heavy. I would like to take a moment to make a special announcement regarding a VIP we have on board today. Usually, we respect the privacy of our distinguished guests, but today marks a historic transition for our airline. In seat 1A, Vivienne put down her fork. She hadn't asked for this, but she trusted Robert Anderson. She took a sip of water. In the back galley, Tiffany froze. Her stomach dropped. We are honored, the captain continued, to be carrying Dr. Vivienne Dubois. For those who watch the financial news, you will know that as of this week, Dr. Dubois is the new majority owner and chairman of the board for Aerolux International. A murmur rippled through the economy cabin. People started looking around. Dr. Dubois, the captain's voice boomed. On behalf of the flight deck crew, I want to welcome you. And I want to publicly apologize for any service irregularities you may have experienced during the flight. Please know that under your new leadership, we look forward to weeding out the elements of this company that do not reflect our values of dignity and respect. Cabin crew, prepare for landing. The intercom clicked off. The silence in the rear galley was deafening. Mark looked at Tiffany. His eyes were wide. You tried to arrest the owner, Mark whispered. Tiffany, you tried to arrest the owner. Tiffany sank onto the jump seat. Her face was a mask of sheer horror. The blood had drained from her skin, leaving her looking gray and sickly. The code on the manifest. VIP. Own. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a guest. It was the owner. She replayed the last 4 hours in her head. The mocking of the clothes. The pasta surprise. The accusation of theft. The assault claim. She looked. Tiffany stammered, her voice trembling. She was wearing a hoodie. She's a billionaire, Tiffany, Mark hissed. She can wear a trash bag if she wants. You're done. You are so done. No, Tiffany said, her eyes darting around. Denial was her only shield now. No, I can fix this. I just need to talk to her. I'll explain. I was just doing my job. I was being vigilant. Owners love vigilance. I was protecting the brand. You called her trash, Mark reminded her. I'll apologize, Tiffany said, standing up as the plane banked left. I'll go up there right now. We're descending. Mark grabbed her arm. Sit down. Do you want to add violating safety protocol to your list? Tiffany sat back down, shaking. She chewed her red fingernail until it bled. She had 40 minutes until wheels down. 40 minutes to come up with the lie of her life. Up in first class, the mood had shifted entirely. Mr. Kensington, in 2B, leaned across the aisle. My apologies, Dr. Dubois, he said, raising his glass. I had no idea. And frankly, the way that stewardess treated you was appalling. I'd be happy to provide a witness statement if you need one. Thank you, Mr. Kensington. Vivienne smiled, her eyes tired but sharp. I believe that won't be necessary. The cameras in the galley caught everything. She tapped her iPad. She had been streaming the security feed from the first-class galley the entire time. She had footage of Tiffany throwing the tablet. She had footage of the fake fall. Vivienne closed the iPad cover. It was time to land. The landing gear deployed with a mechanical groan that sounded like a judgment gavel hitting a desk. The Boeing 777 touched down on the wet tarmac of Heathrow. the reverse thrusters roaring as they slowed the massive beast. Tiffany Miller was hyperventilating in the jump seat. She had fixed her makeup, reapplied her lipstick, and smoothed her hair. She had convinced herself that if she just cried, if she just played the overworked single woman card, Vivienne Dubois would have mercy. Rich people wanted to feel benevolent, right? The plane taxied to the gate. The seatbelt sign pinged off. Usually, Tiffany would rush to the front to say goodbye to the first-class passengers. It was prime time for tips. But today, the captain had ordered her to stay in the back. She disobeyed. As soon as the plane stopped, Tiffany unbuckled and sprinted up the aisle, pushing past passengers who were trying to get their luggage. She needed to get to 1A before the door opened. She burst through the curtain into first class. "Miss Dubois." Tiffany breathless, forcing a tearful, desperate smile. Vivienne was standing, sliding her canvas tote over her shoulder. She didn't look at Tiffany. She looked past her. "Miss Dubois, please," Tiffany pleaded, blocking the aisle. "I am so incredibly sorry. I've been under so much stress lately. My mother is sick, and I didn't recognize you." "If I had known," Vivienne stopped. She looked down at Tiffany with cold, dead eyes. "If you had known I was powerful, you would have treated me with respect?" Vivienne asked softly. "Is that your defense? That you only treat people with dignity if you think they have money?" "No. I treat everyone well. It was just a misunderstanding." "Move," Vivienne said. "Please, I need this job." Tiffany grabbed Vivienne's sleeve. "Do not touch me," Vivienne said. Suddenly, the cabin door opened. But it wasn't the jet bridge operator who stepped in. It was two officers from the London Metropolitan Police, followed by a tall, stern man in a trench coat. The man was Director Claythorne, Aerolux's head of global security. Tiffany let out a sigh of relief. "Oh, thank God, officers." This woman, she pointed at Vivienne, reverting to her old habits in a moment of panic. "She's been threatening me. She claims to be the owner, but she's been aggressive the whole flight." The police officers didn't even look at Tiffany. They stepped past her. Director Claythorne walked straight to Vivienne. He bowed his head slightly. "Dr. Dubois, welcome to London. I trust the flight was illuminating?" "It was very educational," Claythorne, Vivienne said. "We have significant work to do regarding our hiring standards." Tiffany's jaw dropped. You know her?" Director Claythorne turned slowly to face Tiffany. His expression was one of utter contempt. "Miss Tiffany Miller?" Claythorne asked. "Yes?" Tiffany's voice was a squeak. "I am placing you under immediate suspension, pending an investigation into assault, falsifying federal safety reports, and gross misconduct," Claythorne said. He gestured to the officers. "These officers are here to escort you off the premises. We have already taken statements from Captain Anderson and Sarah Jenkins." "Suspended?" Tiffany shrieked. "You can't suspend me. I have tenure. I have a union." "You assaulted a passenger," one of the police officers said, stepping forward. "We have the video footage sent from the air, Miss Miller. You are being detained for questioning regarding the filing of a false police report. You claimed a theft of a master tablet. That is a serious waste of police time." I, Tiffany stammered. She looked at Vivienne. "Miss Dubois, please, tell them." "It was a joke. It was just a joke." Vivienne leaned in close, her voice a whisper that only Tiffany could hear. "The pasta," Vivienne said, "was cold." Vivienne turned and walked off the plane, flanked by Director Claythorne. Tiffany stood frozen as the passengers behind her began to filter out. Mr. Kensington walked past. "Good luck with the job hunt," he muttered. Mrs. Vanderwall walked past. Dreadful woman. Even the teenager with the headphones stopped. "You're cooked, lady." The police officer took Tiffany's arm. "This way, ma'am. And please, do not cause a scene, or we will add resisting to the charge sheet." Tiffany was led off the plane, not through the VIP jet bridge, but down the side stairs onto the tarmac where a police van was waiting. As she was marched down the metal steps, the rain whipping against her perfect makeup, she looked up at the terminal window. There, in the private Aerolux lounge, looking down at the runway, stood Vivienne Dubois. She was holding a glass of champagne, real champagne this time. She watched Tiffany being loaded into the back of the van. Vivienne didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply watched, took a sip, and turned away to address her new board of directors. Karma hadn't just hit, it had landed the plane. 3 days had passed since Flight 882 touched down at Heathrow, but the storm it had created was only just making landfall at the headquarters of Aerolux International. The rain that had battered London for the past 48 hours had finally cleared, replaced by a piercing, unforgiving sunlight that reflected off the glass facade of the Aerolux skyscraper on the banks of the Thames. It was the kind of morning that usually signaled a fresh start, but inside the executive boardroom on the 40th floor, the atmosphere was anything but hopeful. It was suffocating. 12 men and women sat around the massive, polished mahogany table. These were the titans of the airline industry, the existing board of directors. They were people accustomed to $500 lunches, seven-figure bonuses, and the comfortable insulation of corporate power. They were used to being the ones who asked the questions. But today, the air in the room tasted of stale coffee and palpable fear. Rumors had been flying through the company's encrypted chat groups faster than their jets could cross the Atlantic. Everyone had heard about the hoodie incident. Everyone had heard the whispers of a purge. But no one knew exactly what was walking through those double doors at 9 a.m. sharp. Vice Chairman Gerald Henderson wiped a bead of sweat from his upper lip. Despite the climate control being set to a chilly 68 degrees, he checked his watch. 8:59 a.m. Do we know if she's actually furious? Henderson whispered to the Director of Human Resources, a woman named Linda who looked like she hadn't slept in 3 days. Gerald, Linda hissed back, clutching her tablet. She was accused of theft and served cat food by our senior staff. Furious doesn't even begin to cover it. At exactly 9 a.m., the heavy oak double doors didn't just open. They were pushed wide with a deliberate, rhythmic force. The room went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the hard drives in the server rack in the corner. Vivienne Dubois entered. The transformation was absolute. The woman who had shuffled onto flight 882 inches, a stained tourist hoodie and messy bun, was gone. In her place walked a vision of absolute corporate lethality. She wore a bespoke cream pantsuit by Alexander McQueen that fit her like armor. Her hair was cut into a razor-sharp bob that framed a face set in stone. The only accessory she wore was the Patek Philippe watch on her left wrist, glinting under the harsh boardroom lights, a subtle, ticking reminder that her time cost more than everyone else's combined. She didn't say a word as she walked the length of the long table. Her heels clicked against the marble floor with the rhythm of a metronome counting down to an execution. She reached the head of the table, the seat that had been empty for months since the acquisition began, and stood behind it. She held a thick black file in her hand. She didn't place it gently on the table. She dropped it. Thud. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. Henderson flinched. "Good morning," Vivienne said. Her voice was calm, low, and terrifyingly polite. "I trust you have all had a more pleasant weekend than I did." "Dr. Dubois," Henderson stammered, trying to muster some authority. We want to formally apologize for the regrettable events on Flight 882. We've been briefed. It appears to be an unfortunate, isolated incident involving a rogue employee. We are ready to move past it." Vivienne slowly unbuttoned her blazer and sat down. She stared at Henderson until he looked away. "Isolated," she repeated the word, tasting it. "That is a fascinating word choice, Gerald." She picked up a remote control and pointed it at the massive 80-inch screen behind her. The screen flickered to life. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It wasn't a profit margin graph. It was the security footage from the first-class galley of Flight 882. The board members watched in horrified silence as the video played. They saw Tiffany Miller throw the master tablet under the seat. They saw the theatrical, fake fall. They saw the venom in her face as she screamed for the police. It was high-definition humiliation. Vivienne paused the video on a close-up of the pasta surprise. She had been served a congealed, sad lump of aluminum-wrapped disrespect. "I had my personal audit team run a query on our customer service database over the last 48 hours, Vivienne said, her eyes scanning the room. "Do you know what they found? They found that this rogue behavior isn't rogue at all. It is systemic." She opened the black file. "We have over 4,000 unresolved complaints from the last 24 months, specifically regarding the behavior of our premium cabin crews," she read, her voice slicing through the air. "Complaints about racial profiling, complaints about socioeconomic bias, complaints about staff who treat passengers based on their shoes rather than their tickets. Tiffany Miller wasn't an anomaly, ladies and gentlemen. She was a symptom. She was the visible tumor of a cancer that you allowed to rot the heart of this company because the profits were good. The room was so quiet that the sound of rain beginning to tap against the windows again felt loud. So, Vivian continued, here is how the surgery begins. She clicked the remote again. A picture of Sarah Jenkins appeared on the screen. The young flight attendant looked tired but kind in her official ID photo. This is Sarah Jenkins, Vivian announced. While her superior was busy falsifying federal reports and assaulting your CEO, Sarah was doing her job. She treated a woman in a hoodie with the same grace she offered a man in a tuxedo. She was terrified, but she was kind. As of this morning, I have promoted Miss Jenkins to the newly created role of Head of Customer Experience and Culture. A junior attendant? Linda from HR gasped. Dr. Dubois, with all due respect, she has no management experience. She has human experience, Linda, Vivian snapped. Which is more than I can say for the people currently running your training department. Sarah will oversee the retraining of every single crew member in this fleet. Anyone who fails her empathy assessment will be terminated. And, Miss Miller? Henderson asked, his voice barely a whisper. The union is already calling about her status. Vivian's expression hardened. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Tiffany Miller has been terminated for cause, Vivian stated, her tone final. But we are not stopping there. Airlux Legal is currently filing charges for the attempted theft of company property, specifically her attempt to confiscate my confidential merger documents under false pretenses. We are also pressing charges for filing a false police report. She leaned forward, her hands clasped on the table. Furthermore, I have spoken with the Civil Aviation Authority. Due to her behavior, endangering the safety of the flight by creating a hostile environment and lying to the captain Tiffany Miller, has been placed on the international no-fly list for airline staff. She will never work in the sky again. She won't even be able to serve peanuts on a budget charter. Her career is over. The brutality of the punishment landed on the board members like a physical blow. It was a message. Do not cross the owner. Do not mistreat the passengers. I am also implementing a new protocol, effective immediately, Vivian announced, standing up. It is called the Invisible Passenger Initiative. She walked to the window, looking out at the city of London. Every month, I will deploy 20 secret shoppers onto our flights. They will be dressed in sweatpants, they will look tired, they will look poor, and they will be sitting in first class. If any crew member treats them with anything less than the absolute dignity afforded to a head of state, that crew member will be fired. No warnings, no strikes. Immediate termination. She turned back to the table, her silhouette framed by the light. We are in the business of connection, not judgment. I bought this airline to bridge the world, not to let petty tyrants play God at 30,000 feet. If you have a problem with this new direction, if you think service is beneath you, then the door is behind you. You can leave now, and I will accept your resignations. She waited. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. No one moved. No one breathed. Good, Vivian said, sitting back down and opening a new folder. Now that we understand each other, let's discuss the catering budget. I want that pasta wiped from the face of the earth. 3 hours later, the meeting adjourned. The executives scrambled out of the room like schoolchildren released from detention, desperate for air. Vivian stayed behind for a moment, finishing her notes. She packed her bag, a sleek leather briefcase this time, and headed down to the private garage. Her driver, a stoic man named Arthur, opened the door of her black Mercedes. As the car pulled out of the underground garage and onto the street, the evening traffic of London was beginning to build. The car moved slowly, inching toward the intersection. Vivian looked out the tinted window. On the sidewalk, just outside the revolving glass doors of the Aerolux lobby, a commotion was unfolding. A woman was standing there, arguing with 2 large security guards. She was holding a cardboard box overflowing with personal items, a spare pair of heels, a coffee mug, a framed photo. Her hair, usually pulled back so tight it looked painful, was loose and frizzy in the damp air. Her mascara was running. It was Tiffany. She was shouting, pointing at the building, desperate to get back in. She looked frantic, grabbing the arm of a security guard who firmly pushed her back toward the curb. She was mouthing words. Please, it was a mistake. Let me talk to her. Vivian watched the scene unfold through the thick, soundproof glass. She was less than 10 feet away from the woman who had humiliated her, but they were worlds apart. Arthur, the driver, glanced in the rearview mirror. He slowed the car, sensing his boss was looking at something. "Do you want me to stop, ma'am?" Arthur asked. Vivian looked at Tiffany one last time. She saw the desperation. She saw the realization sinking in, that the power Tiffany thought she wielded was an illusion, borrowed from a uniform she no longer owned. Vivian felt no anger anymore. The fire of the confrontation had burned out, leaving only a cold, distant pity. Tiffany was just a ghost, now a cautionary tale standing in the rain. Vivian turned away from the window and opened her laptop. "No, Arthur," she said softly. "Drive on. We have work to do." The car accelerated smoothly, slipping into the stream of red taillights, leaving Tiffany Miller behind on the wet pavement, shouting at a building that would never open its doors to her again. And that is the story of how Tiffany Miller learned the hardest lesson of her life. You never know who you are talking to. Tiffany thought she was humiliating a nobody in a hoodie, but she was actually digging her own professional grave in front of the one woman who could bury her in it. It's a brutal reminder that character isn't defined by what we wear or how much our luggage costs. It's defined by how we treat people who can do absolutely nothing for us. Vivienne Dubois didn't fire Tiffany because she was angry. She fired her because Tiffany proved she didn't have the heart to serve others. In the end, the trashy passenger ran the company, and the elite flight attendant was left on the curb. Karma doesn't always have a boarding pass, but it always arrives on time. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and tells YouTube you want more stories like this. What would you have done if you were in Vivian's shoes? Would you have fired Tiffany on the spot, or would you have given her a second chance? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. We have a crazy one coming up next week about a hotel manager who kicked out a homeless man who turned out to be the building's landlord. You do not want to miss that. Thanks for watching, and stay humble.